did not have defensive basketball tips on my 2024 bingo card. Whatever's happened over the past few months to have everyone frothing over the mouths about defense is beyond me. And don't get me wrong, I love it. But unfortunately, most of what we see is coming from content creators, and just like most of the other skills they teach, it's incredibly misleading. So today I want to have a look at a couple of the more popular defensive content creators, while also giving some perspective and correcting some of the points they make. I'm also going to give 3 pillars of defense and break those down so that we're all on the same page. Lastly, I'll show some examples of relevant good defense that can be applied at any level so you can actually improve on the defensive end. First up, the 2 most defensive creative content masterminds out there, how to make the NBA, and this guy, Cedrick Middleton. Both of these men have roughly 100K followers on Instagram, and they've become widely popular for posting defensive clips, typically in a one-on-one setting, but sometimes in 5-on-5. Overall, the content is pretty good, and I largely see no problems with it. However, it is quite misleading, and it gives people a false perspective about what it really requires to play defense at an elite level. While I believe both of these guys are pretty genuine and probably decently knowledgeable about the game of basketball, a lot of the methods that they show in their content aren't really applicable in most contexts. Cedrick Middleton played 4 years at the University of Akron, and he had solid numbers, so I've absolutely nothing but respect for everything that he's been able to achieve. From what I've seen, he's a one-of-a-kind strength and conditioning trainer who utilizes defensive workouts to stay in shape and also to train the players that he's working with. It's actually brilliant. He's combining his knowledge of basketball and also his knowledge of strength and conditioning to train other players with a kind of hands-on approach. Pun intended. But this is more teaching offense and how to play through physicality and pressure. This is not how to play defense, and I'm pretty sure he makes that clear. How to make the NBA, however, Oliver Shue, I hope I'm saying that right. He played 3 seasons at Rice University, and although he didn't have any breakout games and he didn't really get to play that much, it's still just a massive accomplishment on its own. He did play a couple games this past year for the Hong Kong national team in the Asia Cup qualifiers, so I'm in no way trying to denigrate him. But honestly, I went and watched the 2 games that I could get a hold of, and there were tons of defensive breakdowns just within the first few minutes. At the end of the day, if their content is getting people excited about the game of basketball and especially passionate about defense, I've got nothing but love. But then the development coach in me gets extremely frustrated when we use these platforms to mislead others on how to improve. This is a foul at any level. Yes, the comments are saying good physical defense, or the offensive players are just too soft. It's not a foul. Go watch him play in FIBA. He does the same thing. It's a foul, man. Anyone can show some clips of where it works, but over the course of a full game or an entire season, not real defense. The problem with this is that it only works on players that you can physically outmatch. Look at any NBA player, half decent college player, they will actually try to create contact with the defensive player so that they can control them. Chris Paul, Kyrie, Luka, Shea, all masters of this. These posts, they're great for showing passion and effort, but this is not real defense, and we should not be teaching these techniques.
And I guess you're gonna teach what real defense is, huh?
Oh, yeah, I've been known to play a little defense back in my day. Yeah, that was kind of a big deal. So, there are 3 pillars to any great defensive player: athleticism, effort, and IQ. I would argue that athleticism and natural ability is the most important factor, pretty much with any skill. IQ would be the second most important, and lastly, and probably pretty unpopular, effort. Not that it isn't important, I think it's just the least important when you're evaluating or scouting a player. I'll explain. Athleticism and natural ability, it trumps every skill like 90% of the time. It factors in height, weight, speed, jumping, strength, and it's just impossible to overcome if you're severely outmatched. Obviously not in every case, but when people are talking about there's levels to basketball, what they typically mean is you can take an athletically gifted NBA player that plays with no effort and no IQ, and oftentimes be a better basketball player than someone who lacks athleticism, but they have high effort and high IQ. It's not the fun answer, nor is it fair, but it's just the way it is. Obviously, at the highest level, like the NBA, players generally have a mixture of all three things. Elite players just excel at a particular or all aspects. A great athlete has the potential to lift their effort or their IQ, whereas most of the times you'll only ever have a slight influence over your athleticism. Joel Embiid is the perfect example of being a gifted defender. His motor and effort on the defensive end is fairly average, and while I can't judge his IQ without knowing their defensive schemes, he rarely fully exerts himself on the defensive end. But the fact that he's 7'1", 280 pounds, and extremely agile for his size, it allows him to make plays that very few other players on this planet can. When we do see spurts of focus and drive from Embiid on the defensive end, he truly looks like the best player on this planet. Unfortunately, that is not how you become an MVP, and it's worth far less than spending more of that energy on the offensive end. Defensive IQ is similar to athleticism, and that some players are just smarter on the defensive end than others, but that's not to say you can't work on your defensive IQ. While Steph Curry isn't athletic by NBA standards, he has an extremely high IQ and effort level that allows him to be mildly successful on the defensive end. He does this by not getting caught in mismatches very often, with his ability to play the passing lanes to keep his player from catching the ball, and make sure teams can't often take advantage of his size. Even though his IQ is through the roof, there's just nothing he can do if he gets stuck in the post against a taller player. Jokic is the big man version of this. Rarely does he get highlight defensive stops, but his IQ keeps him from getting switched into unfavorable matchups, and his communication to pre-switch and pre-rotate is probably the best in the world. While most people think that you can determine a player's defensive IQ just by simply watching, it's extremely tough to do using just the eye test alone. What you're actually seeing is effort. For example, 2 years ago, the entire world was convinced that Giannis was the greatest defensive player that this league had ever seen. Not only did he have the athletic ability and the effort, he also had amazing defensive IQ. Little did everyone realize that the key to Giannis's all-time great defense was the fact that he had one of the actual highest IQ defenders of all time on his team, Drew Holiday. Once the Bucks made the trade for Lillard and sent Holiday to the Celtics, Giannis magically became a slightly worse defender, and the Celtics coincidentally became the best defensive team in the entire league. So many people mistake IQ for effort. TJ McConnell, he's an effort guy. Peyton Pritchard, effort guy. Jose Alvarado, effort guy. Elite effort guys, of course. And it's not a knock at all. There are other players though that make an entire career out of imitating this play style, and I call those fake hustle guys. You generally see these type of guys in high school or college, and I know it sounds extremely disrespectful, but I kid you not, some coaches and GMs actually can't tell the difference between high effort and IQ and the guys that put out fake hustle. So hopefully that explains why I think effort is the least important when it comes to the three pillars, which means it's probably the most important thing for you to focus on. If you're watching this video, you're probably not in the top % of athletes worldwide, and chances are you're still developing your defensive IQ. Effort can immediately change overnight, while IQ is going to take some more time to develop. In the past, we've broken down some NBA players, WNBA players showing good defensive rotations and high IQ plays, but honestly, the truth about defense is it's not about highlights, and it's really hard to show and break down in a timely manner. I will, however, show a couple of examples so that you can know what to start looking out for. And one thing she does this play already is she's always in the right spot. She sees the ball and her player, so she doesn't get back cut hardly ever. She discourages some drives, but she also gets over a screen, which we're going to see. Dejanay Carrington does a pretty good job as well. So they're running drops, which is just going to keep Brianna Jones back to the basket, so she doesn't have to come out and guard guards, which would be a mismatch. But their team, their guards are so good at fighting over screens that she doesn't really get in trouble. So DeWanna Bonner does have to help, because Kelsey Plum has a direct drive to the basket. Dejanay does a good job still fighting over, so they don't have to switch. But you see Alyssa Thomas still seeing both. Now she's the low help. She doesn't turn her hips to the ball or to her player. So she's seeing both, so discouraging the drive as the ball comes to her side. Now she closes out. You can see Chelsea Gray kind of hesitates for half a second. It looks like she's about to shoot it, but Alyssa Thomas is able to get there. And then this is something that I talk about all the time with players. So players, especially young players, but honestly, it happens at every level. A lot of players will get hit with a screen, and I call it getting defeated by the screen. What you want is to fight over or fight through it. So she's made a decision. As you can see, their team is playing drop coverage. So she's got her job is to fight over. What they're going to live with is this mid-range jump shot, but what they don't want to happen is just anything to the basket or going under and giving up open threes. So drop coverage is really tough on your guards. It's really hard. If you've never had to fight over a screen and chase, it's really tough and it's really physically demanding. So watching it done properly, it's a thing of beauty. Alyssa Thomas fighting over still discourages the mid-range jump shot as well. No one even has to help. Sorry, that's my ice maker, but not even one player has to help Alyssa Thomas here. Dejanay Carrington is able to stay on her player, and honestly, she can just deny. No one has to help. We're actually out of position. Harris actually is caught looking at the ball and not seeing her player. She should actually be up the line a little bit because Alyssa Thomas didn't need help. So she should actually be denying her player. Doesn't happen. It's fine. But yeah, that's something that Alyssa Thomas does really well. That so many, I'd say 90% of players in the WNBA, but the NBA as well, can't do that. And these are things that, you know, when they're rating defensive player of the year, like I know Rudy Gobert got a lot of hate, but these are a lot of things that he fixes in the defense. So if 90% of the league is not good at fighting over screens, if they're not good at seeing ball in man and they're not in the right spot all the time, sometimes having a big that can just deter a lot of that stuff. That's why those guys are so valuable. Again, that's a discussion for another day, but that's what Alyssa Thomas brings to her team. Does it again here. So navigates the screen, goes under, but now she's up on the ball. So one thing to do if you know there's going to be screens is to actually get up into the offensive player to not give them as much space to work off of this. So again, they are in drops. Alyssa Thomas knows she has to get over. She is responsible for her player. They're not just going to switch it. So being up and pressuring make it a little bit more difficult, gives you a little bit of room to work with. Now that screen is set high above the three-point line, but look how much space. Look how much space she's created. So all this space, she gets to navigate. That's hers now. She's won that matchup. That's all her space to get through that screen. So she actually doesn't even need any help right here. Gets all the way through. She gets back in front of Chelsea Gray before she, pretty much as she gets to the three-point line. Bonner actually shouldn't be this far. I wouldn't help from the ball side corner, but she's long enough she can still probably contest this shot. But really, Alyssa Thomas, she doesn't need help. she just does not need help. And it allows Brianna Jones to stay and pretty much guard this one-on-one. This is where A'ja Wilson has the advantage though. Drives. And honestly, that's a tough shot, but she's having one probably the best season of all time. So you live with that. So this is a strategic decision, them putting Napheesa Collier on Alyssa Thomas. This is it's not worried about Alyssa Thomas, more so just stopping all the other drives, being able to help off in the post if she needs to. She's kind of just being like a linebacker, like a middle linebacker. She's kind of just floating and deterring any other shot. So right here, they end up having a breakdown. There's actually nobody here on Carrington. She drives, so Collier picks her up, and she just goes vertical. She just goes straight up. This is pretty hard for a post player to guard here. Usually you get picked up with a blocking foul. Just slides her feet, stays straight up, and because she's long enough, she took the bump. Yeah, Carrington just gets off balance. Again, just getting a stop when usually it would be a layup. A guard going against a big. All right, to tie up this video with a nice little bow, do I think that Oliver Shue and Cedrick Middleton are frauds. Absolutely not. I really like what Cedrick does with his training. I think it's one of the best things you can do as an offensive player to improve on that end, especially against pressure. Oliver is a slightly different situation though. He seems like a great guy and really passionate about the game of basketball. Unfortunately, he seems to lack 2 of the 3 pillars of a great defensive play. And I hope that doesn't sound harsh, but being 6'2" and under 200 pounds means he will likely struggle at any high level of play. And many of the techniques that he talks about in his videos, encouraging playing overly handsy or turning your back or side to the defender, constantly trying to create contact and close the gap, and gambling and reaching. It's teaching tons of bad habits to the younger players out there, and I'm just not a fan of setting them up for failure. I don't think it's intentional, and I do love the effort that he plays with, so hopefully he can continue developing and keep growing his brand on the game that he loves to play. Anyways, hope this video gave you some perspective on the defensive end and showed you what to look out for. Let me know down below any other skills or topics you want me to cover, and yeah, take care.